So, thank you very much, Professor Furgac, for this kind introduction, and congratulations for all of you for the exceptional organization of this conference. The topic of my presentation, as you see, is the global impact of COVID-19 pandemic. And the aim, next slide, please. I got used with my tools in National College of Defense in Romania. And the aim of my presentation is to answer, is to find out if this pandemic is going to be the trigger of a new historical era as it happened in history, or is the trigger of a reset of the international system, or whatever might be such a huge medical crisis for the global system. And my thesis started from an observation that history of the humanity was written by epidemics and by technology. Epidemics used to destroy the world order, and technology used to stabilize it. It was the example of the Antonine Plague, which destroyed the Roman Pax Romana in antiquity. It was the case of Justinian Plague that practically destroyed the power of Byzantium Empire in the early Middle Age. Then it was the Black Death, which practically announced the end of Middle Age and the beginning of Renaissance, and so on and so forth since the beginning of the 20th century, when the Spanish flu destroyed the Belle Epoque and the imperial Europe and replaced it with ideological Europe, with all those three, you know, very well. And most of us experienced the communism, the others experienced the Nazi, and also the fascism. The difference between an era and another was made by technology, because of course in the 20th century, starting with actually with the mid of 19th century, plague was no more the cause of these disruptions, massive disruptions. And it was, of course, due to sanitation and all these technological developments. But it was replaced by flus, and we had not only the Spanish flu, but there were the Hong Kong flu, and so on and so forth till today. And now we are experiencing this pandemic, which is again a flu, is a atypical flu. So this is the base of my thesis. Of course, please change the slide, next slide. I will try to be as short as I can. The first, of course, I concentrated my attention on the European Union because this is what is interesting us most. And of course, here the challenges were towards the solidarity. The solidarity and the aim, the ambition of European Union to become a global actor. Of course, the solidarity was hardly questioned. And unfortunately, the test was failed by the Europeans in the early stages of the pandemic. All of us, we remember the situation of Italy and the fact that they didn't receive the help from the Europeans, the first hand. Instead, China, US, and Russia came up with the help, showing that at the end of the day, European Union wasn't able to react in the in a efficient way, showing again the fact that unfortunately European Union is still a battlefield for these three great powers that are sharing the power, the influence, the global influence, even now. And we remember, of course, the Corona bonds discussion. We remember the arguments related to the other financial mechanisms that showed the fact that Europe, unfortunately, is still divided. So there are more developed countries, usually Germany, Netherlands, and others, that refused to share this burden with the other countries, even within the Eurozone. And this led to the increase of Euroscepticism, unfortunately. A Euroscepticism that was, next slide please, that was still vivid, actually that was vivid in 2019, for example, when a survey showed that almost 49% of European population has Eurosceptical feelings. And in the spring of 2020, in Italy, two surveys realized by two agencies, Tecne and Dyer, shown that unfortunately the Eurosceptical feeling in Italy was increasing. And there were voices saying that the European partners of Italy was a mistake. So the political impact of the COVID pandemic within the Europe was a huge one. And it was transformed into this Eurosceptical attitude. Eurosceptical attitude that is overlapping other structural crises of the European Union. And we know very well the leadership crisis, the identity crisis, the crisis, the migrant crisis, which actually was the one that breaks the unity for the first time. It was obvious for everybody that in that moment, European Union was divided related to this issue, and for the first time in European Union history, as a construction, borders came up and states came up, the idea of states and of national interest. That was the moment. And the second time was with this pandemic, when, again, European states had their own issues, had their own interests. And it was clear that the crucible of nations idea is a complete failure, and it will never be applied for Europe, because here we are talking about millennial people, history, identities. So it's totally illogical to think that you can swap out identities and replace them with something else. It will never happen. And then the federal project is not very efficient in Europe. So next slide, please. The question is, of course, how did this pandemic, or what will be the effects, of course, of this pandemic? So as I said, in Europe, it hit very hard on political level. Also, it hit very hard in economic level, and I will not get into details because you will find them in my paper. And of course, all these aspects will be amplified and are amplified already by the horrendous aggression war of Russia in Ukraine, which is, of course, affecting all of us, even in European Union. So I expect that European Union will be confronted with a lot of transformation. we might, in the future, of course, and I hope not, this will not happen. European Union may divide, may come back to the original stage of nation states, which is the worst case scenario, in my opinion, because a fragmented Europe is an unstable Europe. Then it may remain like that, like it is right now, but with high tensions inside. Tensions that will end up by transforming. Because obviously all the prolonged crises end up in transforming the organism, is like in medicine. So there might be a transforming in a sense of a geoeconomic project, the same as the first stages of the unified Europe, that European economic community, with, of course, all these economic policies, and the other policies made by the states member, or a confederative Europe, the Europe of nations. This may be another way of transforming, in my opinion, of course. Because, you know, already we are seeing that Europe is confronting with the risk of fragmentation, with the risk of exits, like Brexit. Now, this Euroscepticism is increasing, and we see that there are voices asking Italy to get out of Europe, there are voices asking France to get out of Europe, and so on and so forth. And this voice may increase in the next future. So Europe might be confronted with fragmentation, and fragmentation even based on common language and common culture. So we might have, for example, a Neo-Hanseatic League in the north. We might have the Visegrad Group fragmentation. We might have the Latin Arc, and so on and so forth. Or we might have this geopolitical reality of the two-speed Europe. We might have the Occidental Europe, and then we might have the Oriental, let's say, the former communist Europe unified into the Three Seas initiative. And this initiative is one that I have promoted, strongly promoted in my country, because I consider it as an exceptional project for us, the countries that are coming out from this communist system. More on this topic you will find in my paper. So I have to get to the other slide, please. A few words about the US. Also a political and economical strong impact. The mismanagement of the pandemic cost Donald Trump administration the second mandate. Also, because of the pandemic, as you know very well, mail-in ballot and electronic ballot was imposed, and now it's very much contested. The elections are claimed as being rigged by the Republicans. So this ended up in a lack of legitimacy for the Biden administration. So this is the second impact. Also, this situation widened the gap between the two sides, the Democratic and the Republicans. So now there are voices from the Democrat camp saying that Republicans are even internal terrorists, the ones that are supporting Donald Trump. On the other side, on the Republican camp, there are voices saying that Republican states should separate from the US. So you see the impact, the political impact was really huge in America. Also the economic impact. Our colleague, Professor Furgac, has already shown you the impact, so I will not get into details. I fully agree with him. So you have to keep in mind that there was a geopolitician, exceptional geopolitician, an American one, Frederick Turner, saying that at the beginning of the 20th century that sectionalism in America has preceded the creation of the state. And it will be there no matter what will happen. So this risk of fragmentation, meaning the sectionalism, is there. And the risk now is very high because of this political issue, this gap between this radicalization of the political speech, and also is very, very much strengthened by the economic crisis. Next slide, please, is about China. China had to face three major challenges, all related to the way that the communist and military system, because they are strongly connected, decided to manage the first months of the pandemic. They were completely closed. They shown a lack of transparency completely. And that led to three challenges. First of all, it was the trust of their own people in the capacity of the system to manage the situation. It was the lack of trust of their international partners in their honesty. Yes? And the third was the need of maintaining them in the top, in the pinnacle of the hierarchy of the superpowers. You know very well that maintaining the economic growth is a key point, is the core of the political discourse of the Communist Party. Of course, it was hit by all these three aspects, and especially by the death of that ophthalmologist. You remember the case of the doctor that died and generated a public outcry to the point that the government issued official apologies for the bereaved family. And of course, also China was forced to get involved in a very constant and serious way in helping the countries that were affected by the plague. And we know their efforts in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in South America, and so on. Finally, in my opinion, China passed this test of resilience in front of the pandemic, perhaps in the best way among all the others. And now the fact that is neutral towards this war is putting her into a advantageous position of negotiation with both parts. Next slide, please, is about Russia. I will invite you to to read my observation about this expansionist and aggressor state. Let's go to the other one. The idea is that politically, the pandemic didn't have an impact on Russia. So it was nothing from the point of view of political point of view. From economic point of view, it was a hard hit in the first month of the pandemic. April 2020 was the most disastrous month in the history of modern Russia. It was a huge economic fail. Of course, then they came back as everybody. 2021, it was a positive year from economic point of view for everybody, so I will not get into this again. But, of course, the aggression in Ukraine has ended all this story, and now Russia is isolated from the Occidental world, as you know, but is militating towards a bipolar world and bipolar economic world within her multipolar organizations, where is one of the leaders. I'm talking about BRICS, and I'm talking about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and of course this community of independent states with the Treaty of Tashkent. And I'm quite afraid that perhaps, I hope not, we will see a military organization linked to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I hope it will not happen, but this is how I feel that things are moving towards that direction. The next one are the emerging geopolitical areas. Here, the conclusion is that the pandemic has widened the gap between developed states and underdeveloped states. Developed states have the capacity of adjusting. They digitalize their economies. They develop this e-learning, for example, that we have spoken previously, and not only all this immaterial economy, digital economy, which was not the case with underdeveloped states, where the disaster is becoming a security issue for the global system. And why I'm saying that? Because, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, before the pandemic, almost all the countries were dependent on external help, yes, on external monies. Now, with the economic crisis hitting Europe, which is the main contributor, European Union is the main contributor to these funds that are helping Africa. US, practically, two of the most important contributors are probably getting out of this story. It's remaining China. And we have two possibilities. Either Africa as an extremely rich continent and very important from strategic point of view because it's in immediate vicinity of Europe, will become practically totally a second China based on this, or we will face a humanitarian disaster in Africa, followed by migration. So Europe might be hit by a wave of migration, an unprecedented wave of migration, based on famine and disaster. So this is the impact. Next slide, please. Yes, oh, that's perfect. This is exactly what I need, 5 minutes. International institutions, here is the hardest hit, in my opinion. They have been decredibilized. And especially the WHO, which you know that is the follower of the original institution that was founded after the Spanish flu. And which is the institution involved into the global, public health governance. And unfortunately, it failed totally in the first months of the pandemic. Yesterday, we heard a lady from Brazil saying that her president had a not very adjusted discourse. This is what happened with most of the presidents at the beginning of this pandemic, because I'm sure that we heard that there is no problem with this pandemic in March, for example, or in February. That is just a simple flu, and it can be treated with ordinary drugs. And that was because of the WHO. And there are a lot of criticism towards the WHO, and especially to the director, to Mr. Ghebreyesus, I think, Tedros, Mr. Tedros, strongly connected to China. And it's the same period of time when China was denying the pandemic and shown that opacity towards her partners in the international community, where all this fake information came up and practically were disseminated all over the world. So it's a matter of trust now for this WHO to rebuild in its relationship with the states, the citizens of the planet, which will be a huge burden in a condition of a future pandemic, because that's for sure, there will be a future pandemic, because this is how the world is. From time to time, the world is struck by epidemics and pandemics and so on and so forth. And the next one might be even harder than this one. And now this WHO is decredibilized. The idea of vaccine is decredibilized. The idea of infos coming from WHO is now put on question marks. So here is the great hit, and here is the great problem. It's a security problem for all of us, and for public health for sure. The conclusions now, of course, the conclusions are related to the first questions. So is this pandemic the trigger of a new historical era? Definitely not. It is not. It didn't have the strength to do that because, first of all, of globalization. Globalization was the one that stopped this transformation. Why? Because, of course, states had the possibility to stop this huge losses, human losses, disasters that could create something like that. Usually they create revolutions, and through revolutions the society is completely changing. So it didn't have this strength, that's for sure. But what had, the next slide please, is the capacity of changing the international system, but not in the way that I'm sure that you heard about the Great Reset and so on and so forth. It was not in that way. It was in the opposite way. Because at the end of the day, this pandemic showed to everybody the importance of the state, the importance of the national interest, the importance of the patriotic feelings, which now are emphasized by the heroic resistance of Ukrainian people. How can you be so heroic if you don't have patriotic feelings? That's clear, yes? So it's the same thing. It's practically all these events, starting with the migration crisis, then the pandemic, and now this terrible war, are showing the importance of borders, of states, of national interest, and of patriotic education. And conservative, practically, and the emergence of conservative politics, and the failure of those theses saying that the future will be a future of fragmentation, of chaos, of global society with no identity, and so on and so forth. Thank you very much. I tried to be as short as I was able, and I invite you to read my paper. Thank you.